Welcome to episode 7 of Athena Rising, where we pose 36 questions to powerhouse female lawyers. Why 36? That's the number of states that were required to ratify the 19th Amendment and give women the right to vote and take power into our own hands.
Our guest today is Ami Sheth Sangel, a former big law lawyer and federal prosecutor who now has her own boutique niche practice.
On this episode, Ami tells us how she transitioned to her practice, which specializes in helping families navigate the adoption process.
We're glad you're tuning into our podcast. Whether you are an Athena or an ally, welcome. Ladies, let's rise.
Welcome to Athena Rising, folks. It's another week. Here we are.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Marisol. How are you?
I'm good.
So today we have the pleasure of having on our show Ami Sheth. Ami, how are you?
I'm doing well.
I'm so used to calling you Ami Sheth because that is how I met you and that's how I know you. Probably like you're used to Vanessa Singh. Let's get started with introducing who Ami is, at least on paper. Ami is?
So Ami is a former federal prosecutor. As a prosecutor, she prosecuted human trafficking cases. She went on to form and lead an anti-human trafficking task force in Riverside. And I think she ended her career as a prosecutor there. Now she's in private practice in her very own firm, representing victims of abuse and bringing their abusers to justice. She is a great lawyer, and we are very pleased to have her today.
Yes. And Ami, I've known you for a long time. We met at Kirkland before you were in AUSA, and we both went off to our DOJ lives, so to speak. So it's nice to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, let's go ahead and get started with our 36 questions with Ami Sheth.
So our first question, Ami, is right now you're in private practice representing victims of abuse. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and what exactly it is you're doing on a day-to-day basis?
Yes. So with respect to the practice where it's called Advocates for Survivors, it really kind of grew out of the work that we did, both myself and my law partner at the U.S. Attorney's Office. My law partner, Vanessa Baird-Jones, she was an AUSA with me in the Central District of California, which is Los Angeles and the surrounding areas. Then she moved up to the Bay Area and she was a prosecutor there. Both of us had worked on cases where we saw vulnerable victims, women, children, sometimes men. And these victims, we did our best to represent them, but our job was tangential to that. Really, our job was seeking justice, which means investigating these crimes, gathering the evidence, and bringing the offenders to trial. And as a part of that, there's a lot of interaction with victims and even with vulnerable witnesses. And those individuals oftentimes, really almost always, never had their own advocate looking out for their best interests, both helping them navigate through the criminal justice system, but also seeing if there's any potential recovery for them, either through a civil lawsuit or through restitution. So that the idea of this grew from when we were at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and we kind of picked up on it once we both left. But I do have to sidestep a little because this part of my career you guys might be a little bit less familiar with, but it's actually what I do for the majority of my time now, which is adoption work. So when I left the U.S. Attorney's Office, doing kind of the work that we did there, and I think Vanessa will understand, it's really heavy. It does take a toll. And I found another area in the law that I loved that allowed me to kind of take a break from what I was doing as a prosecutor. So for the last 7 years, I grew and built an adoption law practice. So as I was doing that, I kind of was craving going back to my criminal justice days. And that's how we started this partnership, this other law firm. So a little bit of juggling going on in my life right now, but I have my adoption law practice, which is somewhat stable and steady. And I have this new partnership where we're building, clients and cases for the sex trafficking and other sexual abuse cases where we represent the victims.
So you said that, work that you did at the U.S. Attorney's Office could be really heavy. And I understand that, having done human trafficking cases. But now knowing you do a lot of adoption work and that you do represent victims of trafficking, but on the civil side, I have to say that sounds heavier to me in many ways. Because you alluded to this, right. But when you're a prosecutor, you represent the United States, at least as an AUSA. And you get close to the victims, but there's only so close you can get to them, right? It's not like after the case is over, you're following up, calling them every day and seeing how they're doing. That's really not your role. And in many ways, it's kind of inappropriate to have that sort of relationship with a victim. But I could see you doing that on this side. How do you manage that emotionally and compartmentalize? I don't know if that's the right word, but how do you
Mhm.
deal with that in your life?
It's so funny that you point that out because you're right. I mean, and I think what I've learned about myself is I want to do something in my life that I care about.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any way for me to have a fulfilling career without it being emotionally taxing, because I feel like, that's my way of helping people, helping them through difficult times. And I do find value in that work, even though it is hard. In terms of the separation or in my life, or how do you continue doing this difficult work? I think what I have found so far that works for me is maintaining my relationships outside of work is very important, especially now because I work completely solo. At the U.S. Attorney's Office, you had friends, you walk down the hall, there are people you can go to lunch with. Now, unless I build that community myself, I could just sit in my office all day and no one would even know. So I have joined organizations that have allowed me to kind of forge relationships with other individuals who, I have something in common with. And I think that that's really helpful, right? Both in the adoption realm, I can kind of talk to other people and we discuss each other's cases. And, there's this human side of it. Like we're discussing it for legal advice sometimes. And we're discussing it just to vent or maybe just to talk, commiserate because we both had clients that were really difficult or we both have clients that have gone through really emotionally difficult things. Um, and then what I am still learning is, from this perspective, how to communicate with the survivors of sexual abuse. It's been really challenging. And oftentimes, it's not just them, but it's their families, it's their parents, who have all different feelings and personalities, right? Because some may be very angry and really, really want to move ahead with litigation. Others may be very tentative and just too emotional to really know what they're ready to do, right? They're still healing. So to be honest, I'm still learning the best way to handle it, but it is fulfilling when at the end of the day you can look back and feel that you've done something to make that person's life better. So I think that also kind of just helps bolster my own, feelings of feeling down when I'm working on
Right.
these
Right.
cases.
That's it's satisfying work.
Yeah.
Gives you purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
You mentioned that you were part of some organizations. I noted in your bio that you were a part of or a co-leader of Mommy Esquire. What is that?
Yeah, so Mommy Esquire is a great group that was started at the Orange County Bar Associations. And I think there are other groups like this around the country. And essentially, it's a group of women, mom lawyers. And here, the way I think it was started about 10, 15 years ago, not that long ago, by a few women who just happened to kind of noticed that they all had kids and they would all kind of talk about the juggling of, as you both know, the
Mhm.
juggling of the
Oh, the
schedules.
struggle is real. It is.
Exactly. And I think we all can probably talk about specific situations and completely relate, to talking on a work call and having your kids ask you questions and I mean all of that thing, right? And so the way
Or
that I
showing up
joined
in
this group.
court half dressed. I showed up in court once and I like had coffee on my shirt and I didn't have my jacket. And Judge O'Sullivan was like, he said something. He said, Miss Johannes, like, I don't know. He didn't say disheveled, but he was like, is this how we show up for court now? And I said, Judge, I'm sorry. I was dropping off my kids and I'm sorry. It was a disaster. I didn't know what else to say. So I was like, let me go with honesty.
You were there. You made it to court. To me, that's
a win.
what matters.
That's a win.
That's a win.
Yes.
And I mean, I'll tell you, I once humped in a judge's chambers.
Did you really?
I have
I
to.
really did.
What?
Yeah.
You have?
Yes, I have
Oh
to.
my gosh. That's amazing. I was in a mediation. We were in a judge's chambers and I needed somewhere to go during the lunch break. And I said, I'm so sorry. Is there somewhere I could go? It's like this older, Caucasian judge, male. And He said, "You can use my office." And he takes his little lunch bag sandwich and he's
Oh my God.
it was so cute.
That's funny.
But in any case, this group, and the cool thing is the way that I joined the group is shows like exactly the purpose of the group, which is I was at a birthday party of a kid, like one of my daughter's friends, and I sat down on the grass and I sat right next to this woman, and guess what? She was a lawyer too.
Yeah.
And we started talking, and she at that point was a chair of Mommy Esquire. So she's like, "Oh, there's this great group." She kind of told me about it. I joined. Of course, the next year they wrote me into being a co-chair. Um, but the beauty of it is, her and I are still friends to this day. This was like 6, 7 years ago that we met, and our kids still play together every day. And so it's funny because the way I found the group was exactly the same as the purpose of the group. And every month we get together. It's really, the other thing I love about it is it's very low maintenance. If you make it, you make it. If you don't, you don't. Nobody cares. Everybody understands.
That's
A
my
lot
kind of
of
group. I need that in my life. Yes.
right,
Yes.
because there's a lot of obligations we have that I just like, oh, how am I gonna make that work? Why did I sign up for that? Whatever it is. But so it's once a month. Sometimes the other thing is it's very diverse topics, or sometimes it's just networking or socializing, but other times it's like a parenting topic. We'll have a speaker. Other times it's estate planning and how to get that in order, or it can be a legal topic, just something we want to learn about. We had like a woman from a domestic violence clinic come and talk to us, so very nice, wide array of topics. It's really just anything that we think our little group would be interested in learning about. So
Love it.
You said that most of your work, if not all of your work now, is really from home, which is so different than having practice at a big firm where I know you're around, hundreds of people daily. And at the U.S. Attorney's Office, which, there's always, everyone's busy on the floor, everyone's running around. How do you, in addition to, just the loneliness and having to form groups, how do you really manage your mental health in terms of dealing with the kids and dealing with your family and dealing with everything when you are working from home all the time and it can be isolating? How do you find, and I'm curious, I'm asking this actually for myself, like, how do you deal with that
yeah.
and manage that all?
Right. Yeah. It's definitely been a learning curve. I think when I started working from home, I probably didn't get much done because not just because you have the distractions, but also because sometimes you need that motivating force, right? Like when you go
Yeah.
into work, you have your routine, you have your coffee, you check your messages, whatever it is. I didn't have a routine here. I barely had
Right.
an office, right? And so as I think as I got more comfortable with realizing like this is my workspace, it's
Yep.
separate from my home space, I created my own routine. And the other trick that I will tell you, and I'm like, my husband's around, so he may not know this, but sometimes I will say on Monday mornings, I
Okay.
don't start the day with work. I start the day by actually making a proper breakfast, like avocado toast or something, right? It's like luxury to
We are
spend
the
the time and
avocado
make
toast
it.
generation. By the way, that's a thing.
Yeah.
That's a thing. We'll get to that in a minute. But
Oh, we
are the
are? Okay.
Yes, we are, apparently.
So I'll do that and I'll sit down and I'll watch like maybe a show or two that I enjoy. And this is my little secret, my little time. Nobody else is in the house. But it sounds a little crazy because I've just come off of a weekend, right? Where you've had a break from work. But the fact is, as a mom, it's not a break from your family life. And so I take that little bit of time for myself, and it's often on a Monday because I just need to decompress,
Yeah.
or I'll like put on a book or a podcast and just allow myself that time. The other thing that works for me that sometimes I'm not that good about is just getting outside,
Right.
um, either taking a like walking my dogs in the morning, going for a jog, whatever it is. And it's nice for me when it's just me and my dogs. Like I love my kids, I'm all about them, but there's a lot more mental that's required of you mentally when you're
they're
dealing with
demanding
your
in a
kids.
different way. Yeah. That's exactly
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
So I need to get better about that, to be honest, but I do feel like those are the things that help me.
I'm glad you do that self-care and that me time. That's a really important part of life. Frankly, we need to do more of it.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And it'll be our secret. We won't tell anybody.
Um,
Except whoever's listening. Hopefully your husband will not listen. What is the hardest case that you've worked on, whether when you were a prosecutor or now in private practice?
Oh, wow. That's a really great question. I can think of several. I think the first case that comes to mind is one of my adoption cases. And it honestly, I have a lot of hard cases, so I don't know. But this is the one where I think my work made a significant impact. In most of my adoption work, I represent the family that's seeking to adopt, whether it's foster family, adoptive family, whatever it is. In this case, I was representing a birth father. And what happened in this situation was the birth mother, the couple wasn't married, they're really young. She gets pregnant. She wants to place for adoption. He's not so sure. He may want a parent, but she kind of bowls over what his wishes are and does what she wants to do, which, you can argue, right? I mean, I don't know what the right thing is, but the fact is he has legal rights as a father. And so he went out, got a lawyer to try to basically take advantage of his parental rights. And at this point, he didn't even know, but the child had been born. The child had been placed with the adoptive family already. And the adoptive family, really amazing, wonderful couple that had been struggling and waiting for over 5 years for an adoption opportunity. So now this newborn is in this family's home. And this birth father, on the other hand, has never had the opportunity to even meet his son. And
That's really hard.
unfortunately, it's right, there's no right answer. And unfortunately, in this situation, the adoptive family, and maybe they were advised poorly because I don't think they're bad people, but the way they went about it was really disrespectful to the birth father. They would say things like, okay, if you want a DNA test, sign away your rights and we'll agree to a DNA test, which, right, you can see why that might be really distasteful. And, anyway, the long story short is I litigated the case for the father, and we were able to essentially have his rights recognized. And the child was placed with the father. And then eventually what happened is there was an arrangement that was made between the birth father and the mother in terms of co-parenting. But the insane thing to me is that this child's life will look so different for the rest of his life, because on one hand, the birth father, he's Hispanic. He has a lot of family support, very traditional Hispanic family in Southern California. The birth father, really young, not much in terms of financial resources, but a lot of this support. Okay, so imagine this child's life.
Yeah,
he has the village, but his birth father, his father is still kind of learning not only how to be a parent, how to be an adult. So that's one. Imagine how that life could potentially proceed. And then you flash to a different life. He would have lived up in the wine country in Northern California with the same sex couple, Caucasian, really financially comfortable. And imagine his life in that world. So
that
it's
was
just wild.
those were the foster parents, I assume.
Yeah, those are the adoptive parents. Exactly. So it's wild to me to think that, depending on what happened in this case, this child would have potentially a completely different life. And the other thing is, this adoptive family had to have this child removed from their home when this child was 6 months old. You guys have had kids.
Yes.
You can imagine what that would be like to bring a child home from the hospital. And then so again, it's
6 months, I think, is when they're really starting to fight
Give
what
back.
do they call it? They don't want to leave their comfort zone. There's a term. Now that my kids are not that babies anymore, but they
Is it like
start
separation
recognizing
anxiety?
yes, there you go.
Yeah.
They start recognizing faces and they really don't want to leave the face. Wow, that must have been very difficult.
And so it was. And I think the one thing, again, I think, Vanessa, you might be able to relate. Like, whenever I did criminal work, I always felt like, you'd go through a sentencing, and even if you were really strong in your arguments, you were arguing hard for what you thought was right, and you felt that this person was a danger or risk or whatever it was, right? Whenever that sentence came down, it wasn't like, yay, that person got X amount of time, right? It was never that. It was always, you know what? I think justice was served, but it's not a happy day. It's not a happy day for anyone. And that's how I feel about my really contentious cases like that. I just feel like it's sad. It's sad that, that we have to be here and go through this. And I think that you just have to have respect, you know, and hold a place in your heart for that other family, right? So
I'm curious how you uh, came to start this practice, because this is a very niche area, and it's a very emotionally difficult area, but it's also an area I can imagine. I don't know. I don't do any family law, and I certainly don't do any adoption law, where you really have to have a very good understanding, like you were saying, with the couple not getting it right, of the nuanced local rules and the laws of the specific state in which you practice. How did you come to get in this area of law and start your own practice?
yeah, I mean, you guys are firing some really, really
Mm.
smart questions right now.
Mm.
So I'll tell you, it makes no sense, right? I mean, I went from Kirkland and Ellis, you know, civil litigation, federal criminal law. Okay, that makes a little sense. And then I start working in state family court. Like it's just the path.
Mm.
It almost had nothing to do with, you know, what I did before. But
Yeah.
what happened is, as I was doing these sex trafficking cases, it happened several times where the women I was working with, and sometimes the girls, had children, had multiple children. A lot of times, those children were in and out of the dependency system. They were in foster care, and I remember one specific scenario where I met at the beginning of a case. I met with a young woman who I think she was about 16, and she had just had a baby. And when this case was going to go to trial, she was pregnant with another child. And it was like really hard for it was hard for me to see those situations, because I felt that these women were in a cycle with, you know, not only just not much education about it, but also just not aware of their opportunities of what might be out there, right? So it was a situation in which, you know, you have very few financial resources, you have very few role models, right, to help you kind
Yeah.
of lift out of your situation, and you did what other people around you did, right? And if that meant trying to parent a child, and if you could, you could, and if you can't, then the child's going to go to CPS, then that's what happened. And I, you know, so that kind of planted the seed in my head. Like there's all these children here that are being born into the situation where they stand to go through the same things when they become teenagers or young adults. And then you look at where I live in Southern California, and I
Yeah.
live in this, you know, Orange County community, probably upper middle class, a lot of working families, and I've encountered a lot of women that struggle with infertility, and you know they're looking at their options, and so it just kind of felt like, I don't know, I wanted to be someone who could help one community while at the same time realizing that there was an opportunity, you know, in another community. So that's planted the seed. And then I happen to have a friend who is the director of an adoption agency. This is completely random. Her husband and my husband went to college together. So one day I just started kind of asking her what she does for a living.
Yeah.
And she was really the impetus. You know, she told me about what she does. She explained to me what attorneys do in this area. And so, and then the other thing, and Vanessa might remember this about, actually, I'm sure you remember this about me. My family, I grew up in a family where we owned our own business. We had a
Yes.
diamond business. And
That's where
my
my
brother,
engagement ring is from. Hello.
exactly. That's what I was remembering. And then I was remembering the story about the ring.
Hmm.
You remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, I forced it on my hand. Did I ever tell you this? I forced it on my
Mm.
hand when Kayla proposed, and we were at a restaurant. And I forced it on with butter,
No.
and it wouldn't come off. And we had to go to a jeweler, and they had to saw it, like if it was cutting off circulation, blood. It was bad. Yes. Go ahead. We digress.
Sorry, I haven't thought about that story in years, but I love you for it. But
They're
anyway,
very good jewelers. There you go.
so I grew up in this family where I understood what it was like to own your own business, the good and the bad, right? You know, work never stops, but at the same time, you reap what you sow, the whole thing. So I think I had this mentality of like, I would kind of love to do things on my own and see how I could do them. So all these things kind of went together, and I just took the leap. And I was thankful because my husband was very supportive, right? Because financially, we were going to lose a salary, and we were going to lose any certainty of, you know, of what of income for me, at least for a little bit. At the same time, I had a miscarriage. It was my first
Oh
miscarriage,
no.
and I think with all of that happening, I just was ready for this change. You know,
Yeah.
so I probably leaped
Mm.
forward before thinking, because then I got pregnant with my daughter, and I had no maternity leave to fall back on, unfortunately. But for whatever it's worth, it probably took I would say about 2 to 3 years. But once I took the time, and I'm sorry, your original question was how I kind of picked up this area of law, and I think it was very methodical and slow, but it was just 100% depending on the community of adoption attorneys that are here.
Yeah.
Some of whom were not helpful, but most of whom were very gracious about, helping me start and, kind of just pointing me in the right direction. But like you said, there was no path. It wasn't like the U.S. Attorney's Office or Kirkland
Yeah.
where you have trainings, you have templates, you have supervisors, you have a million people to help you. It was, if I want to do this, okay, I need to go to this conference and kind of start to meet these people. I got to go, set up meetings with these established attorneys and see what I
Right.
can learn. I got to offer my services, maybe pro bono, maybe at a very discounted rate, and have maybe one of these other attorneys partner with me on a
Yeah.
case to learn what I need to do. And I'm thankful because out of all the things I've done, I would say it was the most challenging to figure
Yes.
this out,
No, I can
you
imagine.
know? And so, yeah, that's how that's gone.
Because you're working with these vulnerable people and victims and people that are trying to adopt children, how much of your work is social work versus legal work?
Yeah. It's such a blend. A lot of it is some type of social work. I can think of an example from the last several days that I've been dealing with where, you have a birth mom who's interested in placing, and a lot of times we call them expectant parents, and she wants to place her child. They've matched, everything looks perfect. And the closer we get to the delivery date, the more strife is created in this relationship between the birth mom and the adoptive family. And, I'm the first call a lot of times in situations like that for my clients. And so, and I think the first thing I make sure that they know, and I always remind myself, is I don't have training and a background in, psychology
Right.
or mental
I was
health,
wondering
right?
about that. I was wondering if you took courses to get ready for this because you mentioned, having to learn how to communicate with survivors and to do
Right.
this. So I was wondering about that. So it's good you've mentioned it because I have you done that?
I have not done that.
Okay.
And I do wonder if the right type of courses exist. I'm sure they do on some level, but it's something that I guess I've learned on the job, which isn't to say that that wouldn't be valuable. I really think it would.
Right.
But having been introduced to this field by that social worker was a godsend because I like the advice she's given me through the years, and especially in the beginning, I have carried with me. And there is this trend in the adoption community here. My guess is it's national, where we are changing as a group and becoming more ethical than we have in the past. And I've seen it. A lot of times, the older generation, they look at adoption very paternalistically, where, oh, the attorney or the agency knows how to place the child and, is the moving force. Well, that should not be the moving force. It should be the birth family or the birth mother. And we should empower her to make the decisions she needs to make. But like one little example of that is, traditionally, a lot of times in California, a birth mother doesn't have an attorney. Birth mother signs a document that essentially waives, her right to an attorney. Well, that's crazy. She's the only
Yeah.
one that stands to lose her rights in the situation, or her and the birth father if if there's someone involved. And why should the adoptive parents have an attorney and not the birth mother?
Right.
So, there's a few other people in this industry who I really look up to, and I'm lucky enough to learn from, that kind of, are looking at adoption, with this new lens of we need to move forward in a way that really respects the rights of everybody involved. And so, like I said, I'm kind of learning through the job. But I'm so thankful to have resources in the mental health community that I can easily turn to. And that includes usually it's licensed clinical social workers that specialize in, not just family and children, but specifically in adoption and adoption issues. I can think of one woman I work with regularly, and she herself, when she was younger, placed a child for adoption. So she is an amazing resource because she's not only gone through it, but then she went through the education and the experience of, counseling and talking to women who are going through this. And I can think of several resources that I've turned to in times when I just, my abilities have tapped out, and I really need, we really need help outside of what I can do.
Have you seen, and I know it's so recent that you probably haven't seen an uptick yet, it may come, but since the reversal of Roe, and you also live in California, which is very different. But since the
Mhm.
reversal of Roe, do you expect there to be an uptick in adoption work in your line of area, just given the sheer numbers?
Yes, that's a great question. I definitely do expect an uptick, but sadly, where we're going to see more of an uptick is dependency in foster care.
Mm.
Because the difference between private adoption and foster care is when you do private adoption, it's essentially a contract between two individuals. I mean, yes,
Right.
there's agencies, there's county involved. We need to make sure the adoptive family is safe, but it's, birth family saying, I want to adopt, adoptive family saying, I'm ready to, to accept that placement. When you have the county involved, the county usually has legal custody of the child. And then there's years that go by during which time the county is trying to figure out, can this child or these children be reunified? Can they go to a relative, or are they going to be placed for adoption? I mean, years. I have cases where, these children are in limbo for 3 years. It's not unusual, especially in LA County. The system is overloaded. And if it's this bad in California, I know it's very bad in other places as well. Um, a lot of times these children don't end up in bad homes, but again, there's the certainty. They don't have that certainty or permanency where they are. And a lot of times the situations the children have come from have caused significant amounts of trauma that has led to them bouncing around from foster home to foster home. So what I am afraid of with respect to the overturning of Roe v. Wade is you have women that are now don't have any options, and instead of really doing the proactive, well, you need to, in order to place for adoption, you need to set your mind to it,
Yeah.
a certain point, and you need to be ready to do that. That takes a lot of work. I mean, imagine, you know, first, anyone who is pregnant has a heavy decision to make, and anyone that thinks that a woman that would take that lightly is just completely flat out wrong, right? No matter who you are, if you know you're pregnant, you're going to take that decision seriously. And if you don't have the option of an abortion, then you might not be ready to say, I want to place my child for adoption. I mean, the terminology that people use is give up, right? And there's a reason we say, I'm going to give up this child for adoption. And thankfully, in the legal community, we don't usually say give up anymore, say place, but that's just a nice way of saying give up, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And so if a woman says, I don't want to give up my child for adoption, what does that say about me? That will bring shame to me.
Yeah.
Who am I as a person, right? It makes you doubt yourself, even though it might be the right decision. And we always try to encourage someone that if that's the right decision, you are being a mother by making that decision. You're doing the most selfless
That's
thing in the
true.
world. That's being a mother. And so if a woman's not ready to say that, but she's struggling in any way, if she goes, gives birth, if she has significant mental health issues, if she has drugs in her system, if the baby is born with drugs in their system, the hospital is required to call CPS or DCSF, essentially the county. And then that child's in the system. And like I said, it's just a system that's broken and overworked. And that's, to me, one of the biggest tragedies of losing Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
And I just want to add to that. I'm a board member of an organization called Empower Alliance. And
Okay.
it's one of a kind. There's really a few organizations like this around the country, where the whole goal of this organization is to help women who have placed their children for adoption. Because what happens is if a woman places her child for adoption, she kind of has all these people and attention surrounding her. She has the adoptive parents, everyone's asking about the child, she has prenatal care, she has social workers, attorneys, there's people checking in. Once she has the baby and once she places, all those people disappear.
Yep.
I mean, if she's lucky, she has an adoptive family and there's an open adoption and there's a relationship, but still, they're not in her life as regularly as they were before. So here she is now, and she did the right thing, maybe, but how is she supposed to pick up the pieces? And there's a lot of trauma that happens after that child is born. And so this organization helps women post-placement with emergency grants, educational grants, therapy,
That's
retreat,
great.
all kinds of things. And I've heard that one of the most useful things are these retreats, which they were in person. I think they're kind of hybrid now, where they bring groups of women who have placed together just so that, they can do the same thing that we do, right? That they can
Yeah.
relate to each other's stories and be there for
Mm.
each other. So I
That's
don't know,
awesome. I
whatever I
didn't know
can
that
do.
existed, but
Yeah.
that's awesome. Thank
Sounds
you
like
for
a
letting
great
us know.
organization.
Yeah. I will
Absolutely.
definitely
And
tell people
now,
about that.
yeah, there's been a lot of discussions with us in that organization of what's going to happen, post Roe and trying to prepare. And we're expanding our services to include options counseling and counseling pre-placement, right? For
Right.
women who are trying to figure out what their options are.
Yeah.
What's the best advice you've received professionally, Ami?
Okay, so I don't know if you guys have done this. I'm sure you probably have, but if you ever, go to a high school or talk to college students or maybe even law students, um, one thing that, well, I guess there's two things that I often do, but I think the one that relates to your question is, and I think I learned this at Kirkland. I think I learned this from a trainer who
Mm.
came to Kirkland, which
We
was
had many,
if
Ami. We had many.
I know the
There's no
luxury of
shortage of training at Kirkland.
the luxury of the Kirkland budget.
Yes.
So I remember somebody had said, if you get a call or voicemail or email, call that person back or try to get back to them within an hour. That's my memory. Within an hour sounds a little crazy, right? But
Yeah.
the idea is something that has carried me through my career, and it's really helped anytime I've done it. Especially when I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I will say. So whether it's in an hour, the same day, the next day, some reasonable time frame, even if you can't substantively get back to that person, if you can just say, I read your email, I'm going to get back to you next week, whatever it is, right? Because I can't tell you how many times someone has responded, and oftentimes it was agents that we would work with at the U.S. Attorney's Office that would say, thank you for calling me back, or thank you for letting me know, got it, I'll expect to hear from you from 2 weeks, whatever it is. Because it's just such a small simple thing, but like, I don't know about you guys, but you have this long to-do list, right? And one of them says reach out to that person. Well, once you've done that, okay, you got to put another tickler to reach out to them in another day or 2 days or whatever it is. Well, wouldn't it be nice if they just said, hey, I'll get back to you on X date, and that way you can like kind of cross that off your list. Such a small simple thing, but I found it very just a small tiny little hint that made people appreciate you as a professional.
So I know you spoke about how it's financially hard to start your own firm, which I think is the hardest leap people have to make, right? And then all the other struggles of running a business, being on 24/7 and all that. But in terms of imposter syndrome, which I'm sure you've heard of, like, am I capable of doing this? Can I do this? Did you feel that, and how did you deal with it?
I think I do go through waves of that. Um, I think what really bolstered me is the education and training and experiences I had had before I left the U.S. Attorney's Office, right? Everything previously, because I feel like I just was coming from a place where I built some level of confidence in, my ability to kind of jump into something. And honestly, I was probably a little bit, more confident than not more confident, but just kind of felt like if I can do that, I can do this, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, and so, and then you hear people in private practice talk about this kind of thing all the time. Where like, oh, if anyone tells you the number of cases they're working on, you should probably half it because that's probably what they're actually working on. And that's not my style. I have a hard time doing that. But at the same time, the feeling of, I got this,
Yeah.
I can make this work. You have to take on a little bit of that confidence. But to me, the important thing is also to just be very blunt about who you are. I mean, I can remember the first case that I took on as an adoption attorney. It was a dependency matter. And I specifically said to my clients, I was like, look, I have all these experiences, and I'm someone who will figure out what I'm doing. But I just want you to know I haven't done this work before.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe you were so honest.
you know, especially when it comes to children and families. I mean, can you imagine putting someone in that situation, right? Thankfully, things worked out in that case, but in most of the cases, I, I personally couldn't go forward unless I either felt like I could be honest or I had the backing of someone who really did do this before.
Right.
Um, and so for me, that's been the key.
So we've asked you a lot about your career and your work. Now we're going to ask you some fun questions. What is one thing you'll never be caught wearing?
A full denim jumpsuit.
Okay.
That is so random on me. I can't even tell
I
you.
saw someone in an airport, full denim jumpsuit, fur coat, boots, the whole thing. I was like, yeah, that's
I'm
the
thinking
opposite of-
Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears, MTV Music Awards. Okay.
You have traveled quite a bit that I know about you. What has been your favorite place to visit to date?
Probably South Africa for my honeymoon.
Nice.
Oh,
That's a good one.
Belize would be probably a good second for me.
Really?
Wow. Did you go diving?
Yes, I
Oh, you
did.
did. Wow,
Yeah.
you did the blue
Yeah.
hole. Good for you.
I did the blue hole, but I panicked and I had to come up a little earlier than everybody else because I was that's probably one of the more scary moments in my life, but I loved it. It was amazing.
Yeah, it is a hard dive.
What's one vice you wish you could give up?
Ooh, probably junk food eating.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I have to now ask, what's your favorite junk food item?
Ooh, you know what? I would probably say my favorite is something that my mom makes. She makes all these Indian, you know, crispy, spicy snacks. It's literally just fried dough with some spices on it, right? But they're
What else
just
do you need?
so good. Thank you, right? So especially like kids are in bed, everything's done for the day, sitting in front of the TV. It's such a horrible habit. I'm not even hungry, right? But you just want something little to munch on.
Yeah. Well, Vanessa told me you come from a family of jewelers, right?
Yeah.
In the diamond business, right? What is your favorite stone to wear?
Ooh, so my diamond ring is a round brilliant, which just means a round diamond. That would probably be my favorite because what I've learned through the business is that's the one that actually shows the most brilliance. The way it's cut and the way the facets are positioned, it's supposed to be the shiniest. So
And it's
that
round.
one, it's round.
Okay.
Exactly.
What's the best compliment what's the best
Mm.
compliment you've ever received?
Oh wow. The best compliment I've ever received is from a case where I actually lost and the client we couldn't do what the client wanted to do in that case. And they talked to me about not only what a great attorney I was, but how personable I was to them. And for someone to say that where I've just lost their case is just so meaningful to me.
Yeah.
Knowing, you know, where the position they were in. So I'd have to say that.
It's nice. What's one thing that people don't know about you?
I usually wear pajama bottoms when I'm on Zoom calls.
Is that what you're wearing right now? Is that what's happening? Is that what you have on?
May I plead the fifth?
Yes, there you go. You're a Cali girl now. I know you're not from California, but you're a Cali girl now. Mountains or the beaches?
Beaches.
What's one thing you can't leave your house without?
My phone.
Oh, yeah.
What's one place to visit that's on your bucket list?
Budapest.
That's a good one. What do you do to relax?
Have a glass of wine and just watch some TV.
What is your biggest regret?
Ooh, I'm sure I have them. But it's funny because nothing's coming to mind.
That's good then.
That's good. You've
You don't
lived
have
a
any
life.
regrets.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Feeling pretty good right now.
There you go.
Yeah,
You're doing
that's
great.
good. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
I would want to be able to read minds.
That's a good one. When you have to brainstorm about a new idea or deeply think about something, what do you do?
Oh, shower. For some
What?
reason, morning showers, that's where they
Mm.
pop into my head.
Yeah.
That's where the magic
I mean,
happens
it's
for
not
you.
like
Yeah, there
I
you
go
go.
take a shower. I don't go take a shower for the purpose, but for some reason, that's the golden place. I don't know.
What what is the most unusual thing you've had to eat?
So I'm vegetarian, which limits
Okay.
it, thankfully. I would say a quail egg,
Oh, okay.
which technically is vegetarian, if you
Is
think
it?
about
I
it,
was
but
wondering that, but I was like, maybe you're a pescatarian, but you're not. I know that you're a vegetarian.
mm-mm.
I didn't realize a
Hmm.
quail egg was. Okay.
If you eat eggs, why wouldn't you eat one from a
That's
quail,
true.
right?
That is true.
It's
That is true.
bizarre, but yeah.
What's the last TV show that you watched?
So Fauda, which it's Fauda, it's a Israeli Arab show. It's dubbed in English. Um, it's on Netflix. It's really good.
Is it really?
Yeah.
It's
What's the premise? Now we have to ask.
So it basically it takes place in Israel and the surrounding areas, and the stories all revolve around a team of Israeli fighters who so you come across the stories of Israelis and Arabs and situations they go through. I mean, it's very, very sad and tragic, and I don't know much about that part of the world except for kind of the general things that you hear in the news. So it's just I find it really interesting because you go through kind of the deep lives of Arab individuals, some of whom are involved in terrorist organizations, and then the Israelis, who some of whom are part of the government, and just how those two groups interact with each other.
That's exactly what you need after a very heavy day of dealing with victims.
I know. You couldn't have said Real Housewives of like
I know.
Beverly Hills or something. My God. You know.
You know what? In that realm, my favorite show of ever, I think of all, is Jane the Virgin. Did you guys ever watch that?
I've never
No,
seen
I've
that.
never seen
Oh,
it.
worth
Is that
it.
also on
Worth it.
Netflix? Is that also Netflix?
Yeah, it's on
Okay.
Netflix.
Oh, do you have any
It's
big
like,
summer? Sorry.
no,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you have any big summer plans? Going on vacation anywhere?
We're trying to piece together a summer camp schedule. So
Nice.
at this point, the only thing that we really have for travel is we're going to St. Louis, which is where my husband's from, for 2 weeks, and we're going to put the kids in camp for there, and I'll be working from home, so
That's
Good.
nice.
from their home.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. Our lives now revolve around camp
Yeah.
schedule. Well, yes, welcome to mommyhood. We
Yeah.
join you. We join you in that.
Right.
If you could give 20-year-old Ami any advice, what would you tell her?
Um, Definitely be more confident in your own abilities. I think, and just kind of play the long game, right? This is, your career, your life's going to go on for a long time. Just, take your time, have the patience, and realize that you can do what you need to do to kind of get where you want to get, basically.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
Let's see. I would be okay. Okay. I'd probably be ideally until the kids graduate, I'll be in a very similar position to where I'm at now. Legally, I don't know. I tend to change careers between every 3 to 7 years. I mean, I'm at the 7 year mark now, so and I don't expect myself to change careers, but I am looking forward to other opportunities out there. I don't think I will stop working for probably ever. Um, so I hope to be, in a similar position I am now, and hopefully my kids still like me when they're teenagers.
They will.
What's the craziest mommy juggling moment you've had?
Oh, well, there was one where I had to ask a judge if there was a place for me to breast or to pump, and I pumped in his chambers when he excused himself and he left. So that was a big one. I've also done remote hearings with my children around.
Yeah.
And that's a very challenging one, but people thankfully have been very understanding about that situation. So those two kind of rank up there for the juggling.
Yeah.
So the last question's really an open one for you. I told you I'd come back to avocado toast. So a lot of people say our generation's the avocado toast generation because the women that are older than us were the ones that buckled down and worked and did all of that, weren't juggling necessarily all the things that we kind of are trying to do. in terms of like how we balance our lives and having our avocado toast in the morning. What advice would you give women that are younger than us entering the legal profession, the 20-year-old women, you know, that are now going to law school? Do you have anything you'd want to say to them?
This is going to sound bad.
Oh, God.
Stop bitching.
Oh my God.
I know that sounds horrible. But the fact is, what I see, I mean, I see a lot of amazing, motivated individuals who are younger than us. But as a generation, there's a little bit of, you know, just, not just kind of pulling yourself up and doing what needs to be done. I just feel like there's a lot of complaining going on and whining, and I sound so old. I hear myself and I'm like, oh man, I met, when I was in law school. I remember meeting this woman law partner who was just crotchety and not that nice. But I do feel like our generation got it done. You know what I mean? Like we've moved
With
the
the
ball
avocado
forward in a lot of
toast.
ways. Right. By being ourselves still, wearing dresses and not turning into a robot of an attorney, right? And not giving up either side of our life. It's hard. It's never pretty, but we've done it. And so I just think that a lot of people, growing up without having seen the struggle are just kind of like expect things to come to them. That's not how life will work for you, right? So if I could teach my kids anything, it would be to have that perseverance and the grit to just do what you need to do to get to that, whatever the goal is for you.
That's great. Well, Ami, thank you. We really appreciate it. I told you, unlike 73 questions, we're not that fast. We don't zip through it. But, we got to know you better. Hopefully our listeners got to know you better. And if anybody wants to contact Ami, she's available to contact and certainly is available for work. So thank you for appearing on our show today.
Thank you so much, Ami. We appreciate it. It was great meeting you.